In the summer of 2018, a southern resident orca known as Tahlequah gave birth to a calf that died shortly after birth. And what she did next became one of the most widely documented cases of post-mortem behavior ever recorded in a wild cetacean. She carried the body for 17 days, for roughly 1,000 miles. Researchers watched her keep the calf at the surface, supporting it with her head, retrieving it when it slipped, continuing to carry it as the pod traveled. 17 days, until finally, she let it go. At the Center for Whale Research, they called it a tour of grief. And here is the thing, that was 2018. By early January 2025, NOAA reported that Tahlequah was again carrying a newly dead newborn calf, first spotted on December 31st, and still carrying it on January 10th. This was not a one-off. It happened twice to the same animal, years apart. And that changes the question entirely. Because orcas live in every ocean, and they are apex predators with no known natural predators. They have been documented killing blue whales. They have been seen killing great white sharks and selectively removing the liver, the richest energy source in the body. They are among the most formidable, cooperative predators on Earth. And one of them has now done this twice. This is the story of how evolution built the most dangerous animal in the ocean and accidentally gave it something that looks uncomfortably like a conscience. Now, to understand how any of this happened, you have to start with the brain, and not in the way people usually mean when they talk about smart animals. Yes, orcas have a large brain. But honestly, size is not the interesting part, and I want you to forget about size for a second. The interesting part is what the brain is actually built like, because the orca brain is not just a bigger version of ours, it's a different version. The region associated with social bonding, emotional memory, and self-awareness has expanded so extensively in toothed whales that it has formed an entirely separate lobe. Researchers call it the paralimbic lobe. Humans don't have one. We have the system it grew out of. Orcas have the full expansion. Think about that for a second. The part of the brain that handles who you love, who you trust, and what you lose, orcas have more of it than we do. Not metaphorically, structurally. It's sitting there in the architecture, doing something, and we're still working out exactly what. Here is where it starts to feel a little strange, because that kind of brain does not obviously make sense for a predator. If you were designing the most effective ocean killer in history, you would not put extremely sophisticated system for processing social bonds anywhere near the top of your list. Speed? Check. Coordination? Check. Teeth? Obviously. A dedicated architecture for feeling things deeply? That seems like a waste. So, why does the orca have it? Well, that answer doesn't start with the brain. It starts with the problem the brain had to solve. And that problem is honestly more interesting than the brain. Orcas hunt in pods, matrilineal family groups that in many cases stay together for their entire lives, sometimes with several generations traveling together at once. And the way they hunt isn't just instinct. A great deal of it is learned, taught, passed from one generation to the next, the way you pass down a skill too valuable to lose. And the techniques are genuinely wild. Some populations have learned how to temporarily beach themselves to grab seals off the shoreline, a behavior so dangerous and so precise that calves spend years learning it by observation before they attempt it. Others create coordinated waves to wash prey off ice flows, a strategy that requires multiple animals working in sequence, and if anyone's off, it doesn't work. Others have developed a method of flipping sharks upside down to trigger a paralytic state so they can remove the liver without a fight. Just the liver, because that's the part they want. None of these behaviors are shared across all orcas. They belong to specific populations, which means specific groups figured them out and then kept teaching them generation after generation. The behavior doesn't live in the DNA. It lives in the relationship between a mother and a calf who watched her and the calf who watched that calf. That's a cultural transmission system, and it's been running in some of these populations long enough that culture itself may have helped shape their evolutionary divergence. But honestly, the dialects are the thing that gets me every time. Orca populations use vocal repertoires that are unique to each group, not just different from other species, different from other groups of the same species. Researchers can listen to a recording and identify which specific family produced it, because the calls are learned and transmitted, not genetically fixed. They're acoustic family badges. And a calf raised by a different pod would grow up speaking that pod's language, not its biological family's. When you lay all of that out, the word that fits is culture, not as a metaphor, as the actual definition. Learned behavior transmitted across generations, varying between groups, tied to group identity. Orcas have had that, by the best estimates, for long enough that it stopped being a quirk and started shaping who they are as a species. And here's why all of that matters for what comes next. You can't maintain a culture without individuals who are bonded deeply enough to invest in each other across a lifetime. You need trust, continuity, relationships that survive seasons, migrations, and loss. And building that kind of system and sustaining it generation after generation requires a brain that doesn't just process information. It requires a brain that genuinely keeps track of the individuals around it, that notices them, that registers when they're gone. The social problem came first, and the brain adapted to solve it. Once that system existed, it turned out to be capable of a lot more than hunting. And here's where it gets genuinely strange, because once you build a brain like that, it doesn't stay neatly contained to the purpose it was built for. A brain sophisticated enough to maintain lifelong bonds, to learn and transmit complex skills, to recognize and track individuals across decades, is also a brain sophisticated enough to notice when one of those individuals is gone, to register the absence, to respond to it in ways that don't have a clean evolutionary explanation. There's no established fitness benefit to carrying a dead calf once rescue is no longer possible. Some researchers argue these responses may begin as rescue attempts, which would make sense. But at some point, rescue is no longer possible. And Tahlequah kept going, both times. And here's a detail that makes this harder to look away from. Unlike humans, breathing for orcas isn't a reflex, it's a conscious act, which means that every 12 minutes or so, while carrying the additional weight of her calf, Tahlequah had to actively choose to surface. She did that for 17 days in 2018. She did it again in 2025. And she wasn't alone in this. In September 2025, another female in the same population, J36, was documented pushing a deceased calf through the Rosario Strait. The same behavior, a different animal, the same waters. This isn't one individual's anomaly anymore. Evolution didn't select for grief as a named category. It selected for social bonds deep enough to sustain cooperation. But bonding that deeply with individuals you've known your entire life turns out to produce something that looks from the outside very much like grief when those individuals are gone. The capacity wasn't the plan, it was the consequence. And here's the thing, everything we just covered, the brain, the culture, the dialects, the two tours of grief, that's the part researchers can document most cleanly. The part that gets genuinely hard to explain is what happens when you look at what orcas do when they are not hunting, not surviving, not doing anything that evolution is supposed to reward. Orcas do show adult play, and I don't mean juveniles practicing the basics, which would make sense. I mean fully grown apex predators engaging in behavior that isn't easy to map onto immediate feeding or reproduction. They toss prey around with no intention of eating it. They surf the wakes of boats repeatedly for extended periods, for what appears to be no immediate functional reason. They engage in extended social interactions with other groups that have nothing to do with hunting, mating, or territory. In biology, energy always has to be paid for. Every calorie spent on something that doesn't help an animal survive or reproduce is working against it. And yet here are orcas, the apex predator of the entire ocean, goofing around in boat wakes. Evolution apparently didn't get the memo. Now, the honest version of this is that researchers are still working out what adult play means in orcas. Some of it may be practice, some may be social bonding, some may simply be rewarding in ways our current frameworks don't capture well. What's clear is that the behavior is real, while the interpretation remains contested. But what's also clear is that once you build a brain capable of lifelong bonds and cultural learning across decades, behavior starts to exceed the narrow categories we first built to explain it. And then there's the matriarch question, which might honestly be the strongest scientific evidence in this entire video. Female orcas can stop reproducing decades before they die. In resident populations, reproduction often ends around the late 30s or early 40s, but females can live into their 80s and at least their 90s. That post-reproductive lifespan is almost unheard of in nature. Humans have it. A small number of toothed whale species have it. Almost nothing else on Earth does. And researchers have worked out at least part of why. Older females lead. In resident killer whales, post-reproductive females are especially likely to lead group movement through salmon foraging grounds, particularly in lean years when food is hardest to find. Because the matriarch has been through shortages before, she remembers where to go. And when she dies, that knowledge goes with her. Long-term studies show that when an older female dies, her adult offspring, especially her sons, become measurably more vulnerable in the years that follow. An animal that spends decades accumulating knowledge and using it to keep the next generation alive is doing something that, functionally, is what a school does, what a library does, what an elder does. We have a word for that kind of accumulated, transmitted, life-saving knowledge. We just don't usually apply it to something with fins. None of this was designed. Evolution doesn't design anything. It just selects for whatever survives. And what kept surviving in the orca was a brain so good at bonding, so good at remembering, so good at holding on to the individuals and the knowledge it depended on, that what came out the other side is something we're genuinely still working out how to describe. So back to the original question. Why did Tahlequah carry the calf? Why did she do it twice? We can document what happened more easily than we can explain what it felt like from the inside. We know the behavior is real, we know it carries physical cost, and we know it comes from a species whose entire survival strategy is built on remembering, on bonding, on holding on to the individuals around it across decades. And here's what I keep coming back to. Evolution didn't build this. Not deliberately, there was no selection pressure for grief specifically. What got selected for was cooperation, loyalty to the pod, memory that outlasts a single season, the ability to hold on to another individual so completely that losing them leaves a mark that shows up in behavior. And somewhere in building all of that, evolution produced something it almost certainly didn't intend. A brain that carries loss, that responds to it, that sometimes literally picks it up and takes it across 1,000 miles of open water before finally letting it go. Evolution didn't build a conscience, but it built something so close that from the shoreline you can't always tell the difference. And Tahlequah is still out there. In the same water she's known her entire life. Still part of a pod that's still teaching, still remembering, still carrying everything it hasn't lost yet. Thanks for watching. If you want to see another one of evolution's strangest decisions, check out our video on why it built the ocean's smartest animal and then gave it almost no time to use any of it. And if you want to keep seeing the things evolution did that most people never find out about, subscribe. We have a lot more of these coming.